आगामी सत्रों में मेरी सरकार अपने इस कार्यकाल का पहला बजट पेश करने जा रही है। ये बजट सरकार की दूरगामी नीतियों और फ्यूचरिस्टिक विजन का एक प्रभावी दस्तावेज होगा। इस बजट में बड़े आर्थिक और सामाजिक निर्णयों के साथ ही अनेक ऐतिहासिक कदम भी देखने को मिलेंगे। भारत के तेज विकास की जन आकांक्षाओं का पूरा करने के लिए रिफॉर्म्स की गति अब और तेज की जाएगी।
On the 23rd of July, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the Union Budget for the financial year 2024-25. This will be the first budget of the coalition BJP-led NDA after Prime Minister Narendra Modi began his third term. As anticipation builds, various sectors express their expectations and demands for the upcoming budget. One of these sectors, defence, is eagerly awaiting increased allocations this financial year. India stands fourth in the Global Firepower's military strength list of 2024, ranking above nations like the United Kingdom, South Korea and Japan. The United States tops the list, followed by Russia and China. With an estimated 5 million military personnel, India possesses a total of 2,210 aircraft, 4,614 tanks, and 295 assets in terms of naval forces. In this episode of Wideangle, we take you inside the Defence Division to understand the nitty-gritty of the sector. Predictions from experts regarding the India Budget 2024. What budget will be allocated for the defence sector this year? What are the trends in world military expenditure? We look at India's position as a defence importer and exporter, and the efforts that will be made to scale up defence production in India. The military or defence budget of India is a part of the overall budget of the Union Budget of India. That's allocated for the funding of the Indian Armed Forces. The defence budget includes allocation for India's three defence services: the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. Allocating a robust amount to augment military capabilities has emerged as a definitive strategy for governments, seeking to fortify defences against foreign powers. On the 1st of February this year, the interim budget of 2024-25 was presented, and the Finance Minister announced an allocation of 621,541 crore, or approximately $75 billion for the Ministry of Defence, or MOD. The MOD's interim budget, which amounts to 13% of the central government's expenditure, constitutes the highest allocation among all the ministries. MOD continues to receive the highest allocation among all the ministries. Budgetary allocation to defence for fiscal year 2024-25 is higher by approximately 18.35% over the allocation for fiscal year 2022-23. and 4.72% more than the allocation for fiscal year 2023-24. While the interim allocations of the MOD may still change in the upcoming budget, it does provide an overview of the general direction of India's spending priorities for the defence establishment. The defence budget of India has seen a notable increase over the past few financial years. There has been a steady upward trend in the budget estimate for defence, with considerable allocation towards the Indian Army. The defence budget for the fiscal year 2023-24 stood at Rs 5.94 lakh crores or $72 billion, up from 4.78 lakh crores or $58 billion in 2021. The projected budget for 2024-25 is increased to $75 billion, presented during the interim budget. It represents a substantial growth trajectory. India's national policy has been non-confrontational, with an emphasis on resolving issues diplomatically through dialogue and negotiations. However, India has fought several wars since its independence. The first one was in the years 1947 and 48. The India-Pakistan War, also known as the First Kashmir War. The next war was with China in 1962 that prompted an increase in defense spending and military modernization. The reinvigorated military machine then blunted Pakistan's aggression in 1965. And then India split Pakistan into two during a lightning war in 1971, which led to the creation of Bangladesh. And finally, in 1999, the conflict in Kargil was fought to restore the status quo on the line of control. All these wars indicate that the Indian Army commands a growing majority of the military budget allocations and an even larger share of military personnel.
If you see the last decade or so, whenever we have had emergencies on our borders, like for example, the East Ladakh emergency or the one that happened in the Northeast, the issue is that we've had to send empowered teams abroad to do some emergency purchases of our armament so that our stocks are maintained. Now, that is something which is just not desirable, because you are fleeced. Let's put it very bluntly. The others fleece you because they know that you are at the receiving end. So the point is that with 4 wars that we have fought, that's fine. But now the environment that we have and the fact that wars, which once we thought, roughly last 2 decades, we used to think that they will be short, crisp, and fast. That's no longer the case. You've seen Ukraine and Russia. They are at it for the last 2 years, most. So you have to plan for the long term, because you cannot decide what the enemy, how long the enemy wants you to fight. So if you consider China, for example, our adversary in the north, they have deep pockets. Plus, they have the added advantage of an indigenous, successful armament industry. So their supply lines are there, whereas we are still in the process of trying to get our indigenization going. We are dependent on our imports.
The frightening scenes from Gaza and Ukraine to the deadly conflicts from Myanmar to Sudan to Haiti. All paint a picture of a world on fire. And in this very war-torn world, it is imperative to undergo military modernization and establish self-reliance. For India, which is now flexing its diplomatic muscle on the international stage to pursue an assertive foreign policy, defense indigenization is all the more important. And that's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Atmanirbhar project has set out to achieve. In the last few years, India has been trying to indigenize its military supplies at a rapid pace. Defence Acquisition Procedure 2020, with a focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, introduced major policy initiatives for boosting indigenous defence capability and reduction of reliance on imports. A record 75% of the defence capital procurement budget was allocated for domestic industry in 2023-24, up from 68% in 2022-23. On the 16th of July, in a significant move to strengthen autonomy in the defence sector and reduce dependence on imports, the Ministry of Defence released the 5th Positive Indigenization List, or PIL, comprising 346 items. This list, which includes crucial line replacement units, subsystems, assemblies, sub-assemblies, spares, components and raw materials, represents an import substitution value of 1,048 crore rupees, or more than $125 million. The Defence Ministry said over 12,300 items have already been indigenized in the last 3 years. The listed items will be produced by the Defence Public Sector Undertakings, or DPSUs. The Defence Ministry has set a goal of a turnover of $25 billion in defence manufacturing in the next 5 years.
Indigenization is absolutely vital because when it comes to war, people will twist your arm, and sanctions start getting applied, or the inflow reduces. So the more independent we are in our R&D and manufacture, the better we have. And that's what we term it as strategic autonomy. So indigenization is vital. Yes, in these years, years of globalization, it's not necessary that 100% items have to be indigenous. For example, jet aircraft engines, fighter aircraft engines. There are only about 4 or maybe 5 entities in the world that make fighter engines. Okay, we are trying to make it. We must continue our effort, but then there have to be international tie-ups in certain areas where we just can't afford to wait for an indigenous or an Indian product to come. That's where diplomacy comes in. That's where military diplomacy comes in, to make sure that the supply line doesn't stop when it comes to war.
In the last few years, the government has taken a series of measures to promote domestic defence production. India now produces a raft of weapons and systems, including the Light Combat Aircraft, or LCA, different types of helicopters, warships, tanks, artillery guns, missiles, rockets, and a variety of military vehicles. Let's take a look at a few of them. A tank with battle-winning efficacy, an armoured fighting vehicle with 71 additional features, superior firepower, high mobility, and enhanced protection. This is the upgraded Arjun Mark 1A main battle tank, indigenously developed by India. The Indian Army was handed over this third-generation tank by the country's Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2021. Arjun Mk1A has been fully designed and developed by the Combat Vehicles Research and Development Establishment, a laboratory of the Defence Research and Development Organization, along with 15 academic institutions. The upgraded Arjun Mark 1A main battle tank is widely regarded as India's response to the Russian-made T-90S Bhishma tanks. The LCA Tejas is indigenously designed by the Aircraft Development Agency of the Defence Research and Development Organization, or DRDO, and is manufactured by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. A single-engine and highly agile multi-role supersonic fighter aircraft, Tejas is capable of operating in high-threat air environments. Its combat radius is 500 kilometers, which means it can travel 500 kilometers to accomplish its objective and return to the airfield. And it can travel 6 times that distance when not in combat mode and attain a speed of 200 kilometers an hour. More than 60% of the jet is indigenous, be it the electronic hardware, the head-up display, or even the metal used for its production. The year 2021 saw the naval branch of the Indian Armed Forces make great strides. INS Vikrant became India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, named after the country's first aircraft carrier, Vikrant. India has operated aircraft carriers for over 5 decades, but they were all foreign purchases. The majestic Vikrant ended the long wait for a Made in India warship. It carried a price tag of over $3.3 billion and features up to 76% indigenous parts and components. On the 3rd of October 2022, the Indian Air Force inducted the country's first indigenously developed light combat helicopter, Prachand, meaning fierce. The multi-role helicopter is capable of firing a range of missiles and other weapons. It is the only attack helicopter in the world that can land and take off at an altitude of between 16,000 and 18,000 feet with a considerable load of weapons and fuel. Designed and developed by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, the IAF's Prachand further bolstered the Atmanirbhar Bharat or the Self-Reliant India initiative. As we've seen over the last few years, there has been an institutional pivot towards prioritizing indigenous military manufacturing and procurement in India. However, one question looms large. How indigenous are India's own defense products? Reportedly, the indigenous weapon systems do include imported components that are not exclusively made in India. Even major defense producers such as the United States and France import weapon systems. According to Statista, India is the world's largest arms importer. Between 2019 and 2023, the country bought 9.8% of the total global arms imports. India is followed by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Ukraine, Pakistan, Japan, Egypt, Australia, South Korea, and China. However, this trend is shifting. India is on a path to make its defense sector self-reliant. And to achieve this goal, the government has cut back on arms imports in the last few years, besides taking steps to boost its defense exports. India's military exports have seen a significant surge in the last few years. In fact, India's defense exports reached an all-time high of 21,083 crore rupees, or about $2.63 billion in the financial year 2023-24, with a growth of 32.5% compared to the previous financial year. So, to which countries does India export? India exports arms to over 85 countries. Some of these are Italy, the Maldives, Russia, Sri Lanka, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Poland, Egypt, Israel, Spain, and Chile. On the 19th of April, India delivered BrahMos missiles to the Philippines. The first batch of a $375 million deal with Manila. This agreement constitutes India's most valuable defense export deal to date. Reports are now emerging that the Philippines wants more BrahMos missile batteries from India. The supersonic cruise missiles have been touted as a game changer by the Philippines as it faces a maritime security threat from China.
Now the trend is changing. Today, I can see in this year, in the current year, we have touched almost 22,000 crores worth of exports. And we have a target of 35,000 crores by 2025. And by 2029, we have a target of around 50,000 crores. So what is happening is this defense industry has been opened up to the private sector, and the government has made a policy that whatever is the budget allocation for defense, 90% is going to be spent in the domestic industry. And within that 90%, 75% by the public sector and 25% by the private sector.
According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, global military spending reached $2,443 billion in 2023, marking a significant 6.8% increase from the previous year and the most significant year-on-year rise since 2009. The world's 5 largest military spenders in 2023 were the United States, China, Russia, India and Saudi Arabia. Collectively, they constitute 61% of global military spending. According to the report, India's military spending was primarily due to escalating personnel and operations costs. The increase also aligns with the government's focus on enhancing the operational readiness of the armed forces, particularly amidst ongoing tensions with neighboring countries like China and Pakistan. Reportedly, Pakistan's military spending dropped to $8.5 billion in 2023, a decrease of $13 billion, relegating it to the 30th position globally. However, China's military expenditure grew by $6 billion, allowing it to retain its second position.
We may call ourselves as the 5th largest economy, but we really don't have that kind of manufacturing sector in the country. The only way you can build up your strength in terms of modernization, in terms of Atmanirbhar, in terms of self-reliance, make in India, is to have your ecosystem of defense in the country. I would like to apprise you today that the manufacturing sector is only providing 15% of the GDP to the country. Look at China. China is almost 32% of their GDP comes from the manufacturing sector. China's goods are there in every country of the world today. And you name it, it's more than 150 countries who are using Chinese goods. So that is why their manufacturing is very strong. So we have started. It's not that we haven't started. We have started. But I give the government, I think, maybe 10 to 15 years to come to a reasonable assessment of being self-reliant.
India's Make in India program is successfully reflected in the record-breaking defense production. In less than a decade, India not only indigenized manufacturing of a large number of defense items, but also turned into a significant arms exporter. Achieving self-reliance in defense is important for India to maintain a strategic global autonomy and achieve its aim to triple the annual defense production by 2028-29.